are going to meet with Salomi, and anything you guys need to know about feminism, we are going to talk about it, how women are being treated, how women can take their own power, everything. So let's invite Salomi.
Hey, Nirtana.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Should I tilt this?
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, this is going upside down. Okay, let me. Is this better?
Yay, good. Yeah, I can see you now properly. Thank you. How are you?
How are you? I'm good. It's so nice to meet you finally.
Yeah, it is. So let's start with an introduction, short bit of introduction. Please introduce
Sure.
yourself, Salome.
Well, I'm Salomi. I am based in Singapore. I'm actually Malaysian Indian, so part of that diaspora that you're trying to reach out to. I basically have a platform called I use that to talk about some of the everyday things that affect us in our communities, in Asian communities, some of the microaggressions that we go through, biases, things that restrict us because they're social norms or that's how it's supposed to be. So that's a passionate topic of mine, and so I talk about that in my platform. But I have a full-time job, which is that I'm an HR leader in a tech company, and as part of my role, I also invest time in coaching and mentoring women.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And we were very impressed by your thoughts and views on your Instagram feed. And I really wanted people to know, our audience to get to know your views. So thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks for having me.
welcome. So we know that we have seen that women face gender-based roles everywhere. So what can we do as a society to change that?
That's a tough one. Well, I think the thing about gender-based role is that the key is to first understand and acknowledge the fact that it's not new. It's been going on for a very, very long time, right? And where it's coming from. So it's not something that we can necessarily change overnight, but obviously we need to chip away at it and try our best to make some shifts there. In fact, traditional gender roles, based on researches that I've read, actually apparently comes from years ago. So you're talking about a couple of thousand years when, there was agriculture involved and starting of that piece of work, where traditionally women were actually out there in the field doing the work and tilling and doing all of that stuff. So they were actually adding value to the economy in that sense. But then when there was a change and tools got involved and you have big tools that you need to sort of use to till, women couldn't do it. And so men sort of took over that part, which sort of made women backtrack and go back to the homes and, be the ones who then take care of the family and the children, right? So it's an interesting history that apparently created this kind of a separation of duties in terms of gender roles between men and women, which, has been carried over from generation to generation. It's become part of culture. And so fast forward to now, even though, we don't really have labor intensive work to go out and do, and everybody can basically do similar kind of jobs in this modern society, we seem to be still in that space in many ways where, men are supposed to do certain things and women are supposed to do certain things, right? And so it's important to understand where it's coming from, because we can't just shift that overnight. And there's no point in being upset about it. We just have to, constructively get to it bit by bit. So to your question, right, from a society standpoint, I think, there are two parts to it. Like, if you think about it from a macro level, a lot of companies and governments really put in a lot of policies and programs to try and shift that spectrum quite a bit so that women can actually participate in the workforce and do, men can equally participate at home. Type of situation. You also see role modeling by leaders like Jacinda Ardern, or now in the US you have your vice president who they really show that, hey, you know what, the man can play that role of being at home and being the caregiver as well. So it's inspiring for a lot of us and young girls who want to shift that. But at the micro level, I think at the everyday level, which is what I'm very much concerned about is what are we doing in our everyday lives about it. And I think the key really is awareness and education, but also constructive conversations around it. While we notice a lot of things around us, I think it takes time and courage to talk about it and to raise it. It's really important to do that, especially what I call as at the dining table, like with your family, with your spouse, with your parents, to question some of the logic behind these things. Sometimes there isn't any logic because it's a 3,000-year-old logic that's been passed on for many years, right? And so to question it in a way where we try and hopefully shift that perspective a little bit, at homes. Also, I think we need to be a bit more aware of what information is being fed to us. So if you look around and see, right, media, pop culture, movies, if you look at like laundry detergent ads, I bet you 9 out of 10 times it's going to be a woman standing there and struggling to figure out how to wash the shirt and remove the stain, right? It's not a man who's represented in such a situation, right? So we are being fed all of that all the time. And noticing that and then talking to our families and friends about it is important to bring that awareness to them as well. And I think a last part I would say, which is really important, is for the next generation, because there are a lot of young parents. We really should be thinking about how we role modeling this. Are the kids looking at us and going, oh, mommy must do this and daddy must do that? Are we buying only, like dolls and teapot sets and cookery kind of toys for the girls and, trucks for the boys and putting them in boxes, right, in that space? Or are we normalizing the interchangeable roles in that sense? So there's a lot we can do, in our own homes. And I think that's where it starts.
Right. You're absolutely right. I mean, even recently I had a 3-year-old tell me that this is not my job, it's girl's job. Boy. Yeah, I was shocked.
I've had someone say that to me as well when I asked this kid to outfold some clothes. It's crazy. Like, okay. Yeah.
So how can women break away from the traditional expectation that their identity is associated with just procreating?
That's a tough one as well. Well, look, I think if you go back to what I was saying, right? If you think about the fact that women were not allowed to participate outside, then there was a time when their identity was really based on participating inside the house, right, which is to have a child and to raise that child and all of that. That's where they would have felt they worked a lot more. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong at all with obviously having children and raising families. That's amazing, and kudos to millions of women who do that every single day, right? But to your question on like how do you deal with the struggle of that kind of pressure and the identity is, I think it's internal to start, because like I said, society is still catching up with some of these changes. So society is going to continue to create a lot of that noise for us from the outside. But, if a woman feels that she doesn't necessarily need to get the fulfillment from just, having a kid and raising that child, and there are other areas, because now she can step out in this day and age and she can go do so many things with her life, I think she needs to first convince herself that, that's okay. And, that it's okay, and it's not a reflection of, me not being good enough or anything like that, right? That's one. And I think the most important thing is for her to realize that not having a child doesn't necessarily make it incomplete or make her incomplete. I think some of us live with a lot of check boxes. I must do this, I must get married, have a child, buy a house, have a car, whatever that is, right? So it's sometimes, if the child part is not there, then it might feel a bit not normal and incomplete, which is fair because, we're human beings and evolution plays a role and we all do procreate to some extent. So it's just, it's a mindset shift to realize that you're not incomplete just because you choose not to have a child, and to then set those expectations to your loved ones and make sure that that's hopefully something that you don't have to fight for. But I'm sure a lot of us would. And it starts there, and then, as much as possible, try to keep that noise out, if that's possible.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense. Thank you for that. And Madhavi is saying completely agree with you. Thank you, Madhavi. And yeah, I have seen you mentioning that we are romanticizing it a bit. The role of sacrifice of a mother, the role of a mother. So, how is that harmful?
Yeah, so this is pretty deep rooted I can speak for our community, which is the Indian community. I'm not sure, slightly outside, but I think it's pretty deep rooted where sacrifice of women seems to be celebrated a lot, in our communities. Be it, daughter-in-law, mother, it's almost like this ideology that if you were to give up and sacrifice is when you're a good woman, right? Give up your needs and prioritize the needs of the greater good being the family and or other things, right? Which is considered higher priority. And I actually find this to be quite disturbing in our society because it keeps getting replicated in many ways. You'll see movies, I'm sure, where the good daughter-in-law is the one who gives up everything for the husband's family and for the life of all of them, and the bad one is the one who actually knows what she wants and who goes for it, right? So these are not even subtle messages; they are really strong messages that get thrown to us, and so there's a lot of guilt associated to having your own needs as a woman. And I think it's enhanced if a person is a mother, because then it's even more like it's another layer, not just as a woman, but as a mother, you need to, by default, you need to be a sacrificial person in that sense, right? So that message gets passed on. I mean, I think as a generation, even our generation is guilty of it and is responsible to some extent of this, because think about it, I'm sure we've all heard of a lot of people talk about how amazing their mothers were when they were growing up, and maybe they were career women, but they also sacrificed so much, that they slept very little, and they made sure that they came back from work and made sure there was good food on the table. And we talk about it proudly, like the fact that our mothers sacrificed a lot of things for us is a good thing, right? But nobody stops and says, well, what was dad doing during that entire period, right? Why wasn't dad trying to help mom balance this so that she doesn't have to sacrifice on her sleep, right? So I think we celebrate it to a large extent. Even for Mother's Day, we've seen this, right? We see a lot of mom sacrifice a lot for me type of messages being celebrated. But for Father's Day, it's dad's my hero. It's not dad sacrificed, right? So dad's my hero type of thing. So I think it's very harmful to your question, because it really, shifts people's minds, as in it makes young girls even think that, right, in order to be accepted by society, in order to be considered good, it actually requires us to actually sacrifice a lot of things. And I think that's not fair, because that's not the same expectation that has been set to men in many ways.
Recently, I even saw a photograph where woman, she was a middle-aged woman and she had a oxygen mask, and she was standing in the kitchen cooking, and it said mother's sacrifice. That, and again, thank God, someone had written beneath it saying that this is not sacrifice. This is not sacrifice. It made sense. What we are glorifying is sending out a wrong message. She must not be allowed to do that. She must not be expected to do that. That is something I wanted to say. Yes. And yeah sacrifice. And even recently I read a study on women's reproductive health. Even women's, even during women when they undergo treatments regarding their reproductive health, they don't have enough anesthesia and stuff. They are expected to bear a lot of pain without they're expected to have a larger threshold of pain. Actually, why should it be expected? It should not be expected.
Wow, that's crazy. I've actually had somebody say to me, they can't handle it, that's why they've gone for a C-section. They can just do the normal. But you know what, if there's an option to go for a C-section and you don't have to go through so much pain, why not?
It's an
you know.
individual's choice, how come
Yeah.
everybody makes it their business about what a woman should or should not do, what a woman could or could not do, or should be able to or should not be able to do.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
individual's perspective. How come it's a public, she's not a public property. Yeah, she's an individual, she has her own opinions, she has her own choices, she's allowed to make her own choices. And yeah, that study was actually an eye-opener, because we are progressing a lot in science, but that particular part we are still not concentrating, because they're expected
Right.
to undergo a lot of pain, and they're expected to bear with it. Even a pregnant woman cannot go for a dental emergency, because that anesthesia might affect the
Right.
fetus and all that. Yeah, and even during an insertion of an IUD, if she's not comfortable, she's not given a local anesthesia, she's expected to bear with it. There is a lot of things that was an eye opener in that study, and yes, it's something that everyone must read.
That's a really good one.
Yeah, and yeah, how can women deal with gender discrimination and sexual harassment at the workplace, or even anywhere?
Well, at work, yeah. So much of things that happen in the workplace obviously come from the outside. And that is the part where I think, people sometimes we seem to disassociate the workplace from society. It is the same people on the outside with certain behaviors who actually walk into the workplace. And they can't necessarily check out all the biases that they may be having or certain behaviors that they may be displaying, right? So it is while it may be a workplace issue, it's also a social issue outside. And to your question on, well, how do you deal with it? I think there are a number of things, right? I think it's very difficult. I mean, and I've been in the corporate environment for a long time, and I see how it's not easy, because your workplace environment is a much smaller environment, and it's got hierarchies. There's a lot of power distance and things that happen as well, right? It's not easy to deal with that. So I think the very first thing, which is interesting, which you would think that everybody would know about, but I thought I should call it out, is that women in the workplace first need to know what's okay and what's not okay. Just recognizing what is not okay, because a lot of these things happen in a very subtle manner, be it comments or whatever else that we may experience. I find a lot of women being confused about it, like, is it actually okay, or am I making a big deal out of this, right? Should I not say anything because maybe I'd be considered too sensitive or overreacting to something like that? I think we all need to first get it clear in our heads as what is not okay, what is not acceptable behavior. And if we have doubts, we should talk about it to clarify that with each other, right? And not just suffer alone, which is one. The other piece is, since you said workplace, it also need to build their own awareness around the expected behaviors and the culture of the organization, because every company typically has some sort of expectations on how people should behave and what's accepted and what's not. And go look at code of conduct documents or workplace behavior expectations, whatever that is, to understand, all right, this is exactly what the company is saying is not okay, and it agrees with what I'm thinking as well. To sort of reinforce that in your own mind is what I would say first. And the third piece is, I can't stress this enough, is that women should definitely invest in some sort of mentorship with more senior women in the organizations.
Right.
A lot of times they struggle alone. They're not sure, like, because, as I said, sometimes they're confused, and they may be in fear. And it really is important for them to talk it through with one or two individuals who they really trust, who actually have a lot more experience, who are able to draw from their experience, who can guide and advise on what can be done, what shouldn't, and how to go about managing it. Talking just about, at your peer set level or with your own family sometimes may not necessarily give you the whatever you need to know in that sense. You not get that clarity. But talking to other women who are more senior is a big thing. So if women haven't yet done that, I would say please go build that network and get that little bit of that mentorship and advocacy from other senior women. And of course, there are hopefully channels to reach HR and management or senior management, which I think women should use. Find out what those channels are. Also find out and make sure that they are clear that there's no fear, that it's psychologically safe for them to raise these issues, and that there will be a neutral, fair process, hopefully, that HR will conduct in terms of looking into what this concern is, right? Now, worst case, failing which, if they're not getting that support that they need, I would say they can also do some research on what exists outside in the external environment. So many countries have organizations or NGOs that help women through these kinds of situations, right? Like I'm in Singapore and we have that as well. You just pick up the phone and call them and they will advise you on even legally how do you approach this. It's free advice at times, right? So they can figure that out through external means. And worst case, I would say, look, sexual harassment is a very serious topic and is a serious concern, and go to the police. If you really can't find any help, I would say step up and try and see if you can get the right support through the legal system. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for that. And since we are talking about work and the workspace, since women do not have to sacrifice their career for their family, or it should not be either or. They should be able to have it all. So for women who have families, who have kids, and they do not have a sufficient support system, or as you have worked in your corporate environment, so do you have any idea about the resources they can avail so that they can do it all, have a career as well as a family?
Yeah. It's interesting how we say do it all. Well, it is do it all. It is, career and family. But I think sometimes when we talk about having it all, I think we're looking at it from a standpoint of doing it alone. Right? Doing it all doesn't necessarily mean doing it alone. I think that's really important. While, of course, we want to strive to be independent and do a lot of things, being independent is not the same as doing everything alone independently, right? So I think there's a difference there. And I think sometimes doing it all, while I really admire people who do it all, it may not be sustainable long term unless we have the right support system, right? You're going to end up being burnt out or pushing yourself too much if you're trying to do everything without the right support system.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So what I would say is the support actually starts at home. While, of course, we want to hope that there's an external support system, I would encourage women to think about what sort of expectations are they setting within the home, with their spouses, with their parents, family, in-laws, whatever that looks like, to say that, hey, I want to be able to do this and I need your support. And I can't do this alone. Right? So I need to know how we can work this out.
Okay.
Right?
So if only we got it as soon as we asked.
Of course, exactly. Well, this is interesting because to your point, right? If we don't get it is when we start looking outside. Okay, maybe, I have to do it all and maybe I can look for that daycare center, which will help me. And then it's my problem to deal with. But really, it's not just my problem, right? If I'm in a healthy relationship, it's not my problem having to take care of a child. It's got to be our thing because we made a decision to have the child, and therefore we need to be able to balance it out somehow, right? Some, different relations are different. Some are more, some are less. You give more, I give less. That kind of thing obviously would be. But I think it starts with communication and hopefully setting that expectation, having the conversation. Now, in fact, one of the reasons why I even start with the social shifter is to try and help women think through all of this before they get into it. So, I noticed that people my age, a lot of my, even my own friends, some of them just sort of got into a marriage and then had the child and then started realizing, oh, I'm struggling. But didn't necessarily have that conversation before they got married to say, hey, you know what? This is my plan for my career and I want to do A, B, and C, whatever that looks like. And what is yours? And let's talk about it and how this will work. I think we just sort of skip that, bypass that part and go straight into it. And then we realize that it's so difficult to, sort of backtrack and then go back and say to our spouses that, you know what, I need your support for a career. So I think it starts then. Again, you would see the common theme, right? I really encourage people to have the conversation. While it requires courage and confidence, it is important for us to do that and to ensure that we have a healthy relationship. But outside of that, of course, it all depends on the support system outside, because there are going to be daycare options, hopefully, and depending on the organization you're in, maybe there are options there as well in terms of leave and things like that. And I'm just glad that a lot of companies have started thinking about these things and putting that as part of their benefits and policies, which really helps women stay in the workforce to a large extent. But another thing that we should be thinking about outside of our immediate family is the extended support system or the community that we build around. Especially if you're single women or single mothers in this case, right? So you may not have the spouse support necessarily, but maybe you can tap on that aunt who really loves your kids, talk to some of your girlfriends who are really there to help you, reach out and build that support system, because frankly, we are not designed to live alone. As human beings, it's just not possible to try and do everything alone, right? I mean, I think we need to acknowledge that to a large extent, and there's no shame in reaching out, because I think all it takes is for us to reach out, and if we are able to build that trusted environment, it becomes a really fulfilling network that we've built. So hopefully that is something that we also invest in.
Right. Okay. So thank you for that. And next question, let me ask this. What do you think of the microaggressions that the South Asian society tolerates?
A lot. Well, microaggression is an interesting topic because, why we talk about injustice and unfairness at a very large, big level, right? Microaggression is very much every day. It's very much the little things that we hear and see and say to each other, that hurts people and leaves a deep impact, that is based a lot on biases that we have, right? So, and it's on multiple fronts. And if specifically South Asian, to your question, a lot of it is gender-based, a lot of it is color-based. That's another topic I talk about, which is colorism. I do see microaggressions against people of the LGBTQ community, people who of a certain race within the community. So a lot of these microaggressions do exist, and they are in the form of, interestingly, some of them are in the form of compliments, but they're actually insults. They're not racist comments or outward sexist comments. It's all little things, right? A little body language, a couple of things we say, type of things.
Even the way they look, the eyes.
Yeah. I can give you some real examples of what I've been told by my friends or what I myself have gone through, right? My own example was quite interesting. I mean, there's so many of these examples, but a recent one is just soon after my husband and I got married. We met up with this couple who were friends of my husband, and we were just having dinner and talking about a lot of things. And the topic started going around, cooking and marketing and helper and maid and those kinds of things. And I started laughing actually, because the lady, every time she had a question about like which supermarket do you go to, or what do you cook, do you cook lunch or dinner, she would literally turn and look at me and ask those questions only to me, right? While other things, she was having a conversation with my husband and me and her husband, but only when it came to gender specific questions or topics, she would just shift her view. So at one point I got so tired of it and she asked some question about marketing or price or something like that, and I looked at my husband and I said, I don't know, baby, can you tell her what I actually don't know, he will know. Right? So she then, obviously that was another shock. What? He takes care of part of the marketing? So I was like, yeah, man, we sort of separate some of this work. I don't have to be the one doing everything. So he does part of it, and that's normal. Right? So these are microaggressions because it's a very casual conversation, but you can start seeing some of those body languages, right? I've even had a friend tell me about how, he's a sort of a fit, tall Indian guy, dark skinned. He entered an MRT, and the moment he entered, there was a girl from another race who just literally clutched a handbag and walked away, far away. That is a microaggression. That sort of passes a very disturbing message that, you know what, I don't trust you because of how you look, right? Things like that, they often come up. And the thing is, it hurts the other party a lot, right? And imagine having to deal with it from the time you are young, especially if it's based on outlook, if it's based on, how you look, right? Imagine having to deal with it as a child, a teenager, into your adulthood, and just dealing with it and not saying much. So these are all the different little microaggressions that I think as a community, we really need to start thinking about what we're seeing and how we're coming off. The intent is very clear. I don't think there's bad intent, but the impact is what we need to be thinking about.
Exactly. I had a friend say to me, "Oh wow, your husband is okay with a sandwich in the morning. We eat South Indian breakfast. He's okay with a sandwich." And she didn't mean to hurt, as you said. It wasn't said with a bad intention, but still, these small things, they do matter. We have to think before what we are asking or what we are saying. You're right. And and how have we internalized colorism, and how does it impact society?
Well, that's just a follow-up from what I just described, right? With a friend of mine who went into the train. Colorism is a very deep topic for our society. It's a major, issue, and it's got its roots in, I guess, colonization and a lot of other things like our caste system as well. But I think in general, in the Asian society, there's this ideology that the more light-skinned you are, the
you're buffering. Sorry.
For a second.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so the more light-skinned you are, the better it is. Or actually, it goes deeper than that, because the more light-skinned you are, the more superior you are considered, and the more inferior you're considered if you're darker skinned, right? And or you're looked at as someone who's more educated or more cultured, or possibly a person who has more money, because the darker skinned person is associated to being maybe poor. So there's a lot of those biases which actually translate into those microaggressions in many ways, right? But your question on internalizing colorism, that's a very different problem, in the sense that while we may be experiencing this around us, sadly, a lot of these things we also internalize. So I'm a dark-skinned person. I end up, without even realizing, also believing that it's true that the lighter-skinned person is more attractive because of their skin color. I've internalized it. Like much of the patriarchy is internalized, as in by women, right? Who believe that women are supposed to be a certain way and a little bit more, submissive versus men, etc. Right? Similar to that, it's colorism as well, works that way. So, and imagine actually truly believing that and living your life like that, like, that person is better off than you, that you are not so good looking, or you're not worth certain things. That's a really sad reality for a lot of people who are darker skinned. And I actually recently wrote an article around this, and I published it on my page as well, which was a collaboration, where I talked about some of the signs that we've actually internalized colorism. Like, how do you test yourself if you're a dark-skinned person, whether or not you yourself are a colorist as a dark-skinned person? So, some of the things that come top of my mind is, if you yourself hold back from going out in the sun and having a good time, there's a beach or whatever, and you're holding yourself back, you probably internalize colorism to a large extent. Nobody's telling you to do it, or nobody is telling you, oh no, don't go out and you're going to get brown or whatever, right? But you consciously hold back, right? Or you consciously don't wear certain colors because you think that you're not going to look good in those colors yourself. Or you're investing in fairness products and trying your best to bleach and do those kinds of things, which I know a lot of women do in the South Asian community, right? Another interesting one that I think I would urge people to think about is, I've seen situations where somebody who's darker skinned would maybe marry someone who's lighter skinned, or they have a girlfriend who's lighter skinned, and they look at that as an achievement, being with a lighter skinned person.
Yeah.
Like, oh wow, that's a prize that I've gotten. And if that is the case, I think about that is really internalizing colorism. But also, have we thought about So if that is an achievement for you, the darker skinned person, what are you to that person? So if it's a step up for you, you can't possibly believe that you are a step down for your partner, right? So these are the little things that I think we should test ourselves. And frankly, biases are like that. Even though we are dark skinned, we don't obviously want to have biases against other dark skinned people or even ourselves. It happens over the years. We ourselves create those biases for ourselves. And so it's internalized in many ways. So I think just, thinking through it and shifting some of those perspectives will be a good start.
Right. Yeah, that's a lot of food for thought, It's not just about colorism, but how we are actually internalizing it is something that I never thought about. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Of course.
And yeah, sometimes I feel like, I don't know about other countries. US is the only other country that I've seen other than India. So sometimes I feel like I want to bring all of our Indians back here to US at least for a month, After coming here, people would say, wow, what a beautiful skin you have. You have such a tanned skin. And, it's completely opposite.
Yep. That's true. That's
That's
true as well. I did a short assignment in Ireland for work, and that was one of the main things that I was told. Like, it's so amazing, you're so brown, it's so nice, and I wish I could tan. And we only get 1 month of sun in a year, and there's not enough sun.
Exactly, and they admire our skin. It has to be. It's a knowledge that has to be given. I think it's an experience that is a must. Actually, maybe then there will be a little bit of shift in our thought processes. And yeah, one just final question. So, is there one book that you really admired? That really inspired your feminism?
Oh wow, there's a lot. And I can't think of one right now, but I can think of one.
Just give all the suggestions. Our audience can get all of them. Get themselves fortified.
Well, I think, yeah. The more recent one, which is actually not a very new book, but it's pretty old. But I just went to it just because I thought I should. Is Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. She wrote it some time ago when she was still in Facebook, and she.
Can you spell that? Sorry.
Lean In, Lean space IN.
Okay.
Yes.
Lean In. Okay.
Yeah, by Sheryl Sandberg, who is the she the COO or CTO of Facebook, basically. Yeah. So she really describes her journey in a very, very casual, nice way, where you think about, and it's focused really on corporate life to some extent, and how women can sort of what are the things that women should be thinking about to sort of shed a lot of the blocks and challenges that they themselves have in the corporate world, to be able to climb the corporate ladder or to achieve whatever they want in the corporate life, right? And the thing that inspired me about that, while I may or may not agree with everything that she said, but the approach she took, which was, there are lots of things we need to do for ourselves. What the example I just gave you around, have that conversation with the spouse to say, hey, this is what I want to do. Can you help me? I need your support. Is something that we need to do. It won't just be handed to us. And we know that, right? For a fact. So having that conversation becomes, in fact, that thought came to me after that book, in fact, about setting that expectation ahead of time. So she doesn't go down a negative path. She goes down a very positive path, where there are lots of things that we do that we block ourselves, and we just confine to social norms and expectations, or we just go ahead and just play along and we don't question it, right? So I feel that approach was really interesting, and it was really good. So I would encourage that particular book. And I know nothing else coming to me because it's the latest one that I read, and that is one of it, but I can definitely share others in the future.
Sure. Have you read Why We Should All Be Feminists? We Should All Be Feminists, I think.
No, I haven't.
It's by an author from African continent, and it was very similar to our South Asian culture.
Okay.
It was beautiful. There was no indignant rage. It was a very matter of fact observation. It was very beautiful actually. Why we should all be feminists. You should try that.
Okay, I will
Thank
for sure.
you for that, for your time, and it was awesome talking to you, and thank you again for coming here and illuminating us about so many issues that we have to think about. As you said, the what I'm taking away from this interview is, just because maybe we think it won't happen, we shouldn't stop asking. That is the first step. Women have to start asking, this is what I want, is something that we have to start asking. Maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't get it, maybe it will happen only 2 generations down the lane. But you have to start asking. You have to start making sure that this is what you want. I'm also a priority to me, and this is what I want to do it. Please, can you help, is something that we have to start asking now, so that at least we'll get a response 2 generations down the line, as I
Absolutely.
said.
I agree. And when we ask, and we have to remember that we're not alone necessarily. There are lots and lots of people who are invested in such conversations. So if you look around, that's why I'm such a big proponent of building a good network. Building a network of girlfriends, of people at the workplace who are allies or advocates for women's empowerment, or any other group of people who can really help and support you, because you don't have all the answers. So while you can read books and watch YouTube videos, the real life interactions really help you, because people will be able to give you a different perspective and also give you tools and maybe BKMs that they've seen before, which has worked. So I think it's really important to build it from a community standpoint, more than anything else, and then use that. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much, Salomi. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for having
such a pleasure.
Yeah, and I am really hoping all our audience are gonna see it, if they haven't seen it already on live, and they are gonna get inspired by you. So thank you so much for inspiring our audience, and thank you for being you, actually, being on your Instagram feed.
Thank you so much, Thanks for having me.
All the best for your future too, and keep doing the good work.
Sure. Take care. Bye.
Bye.